Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello and a very warm welcome to the latest episode. It's Friday the 17th of April 2026. Happy Friday to you. We've made it through yet another week. It has been a really gorgeous week as well. Absolutely perfect for weeding because the soil is quite moist and the weeds are just coming out so easily. But the temperatures have been quite up and down. It's been quite chilly in the morning. The plot is always quite cold in the morning anyway. Lots of dew on the ground as well. So I always start the day with wrist warmers and jumpers and scarves, and I know even scarves at this time of year. And then by the afternoon I'm absolutely sweltering and there are layers just flying off all over the place. Molly's not had such a brilliant week. He got shut in his house by accident one day. That was Wednesday, so he spent the whole day inside by himself. I think the girls had a lovely day outside. They really enjoyed themselves. But bless him, that was unfortunate. And I got there to put them all to bed in the evening and open the door, and there he was. So he came out for about 30 seconds and then he had to go back into bed. Anyway, I made him some scrambled eggs for Thursday, so he's kind of forgiven me. Now, I've got so much to tell you about tonight. I've got news from the field, news from the greenhouse, other news, a pricing stuff up, some questions to answer from Spotify, plus the plant profile of the week. So let's get started. Now, my other half is in the doghouse this week. He managed to strim over 40% of my Cephalaria crop. Now, the Cephalaria are the giant Scabious, so they're a kind of beautiful, pale, buttery yellow colour, really soft and lovely, not sort of battery acid yellow. And they have their own designated bed, and I grew them from seed last year. They are a perennial, and they didn't do anything last year, which I was very disappointed about, but I am very hopeful. Well, I was very hopeful that they were going to do something this year. So my other half and I had a conversation about strimming nettles and weeds away. And there was a misunderstanding somewhere along the line when I was explaining that I didn't want him to strim because it's easier to pull up the weeds by hand if you've got something to get hold of. You know, if they're strimmed to the ground, it makes it a lot harder. And at that point, he'd already done it, but he didn't say that he'd already done it. So there was this terrible confusion. And then I went into the field the next day and found that 40% of the crop had been completely sheared down to the ground. Now, he likes to point out that represents just 4 plants. And whilst technically he is correct, I only had 10 to start with. I like to point out that it's nearly half of my crop, and they had been earmarked for weddings this year. So my wedding event florist saw a photo of them and thought they looked absolutely lovely. And I have been waiting patiently now for over a year for these guys to do something. So he is officially banned from strimming anything anywhere inside the metal fence panels from now on. And he said something along the lines of that he didn't want to do it anyway. So we've come to a mutual agreement there that hopefully nothing else will get strimmed to the ground. But off the back of the tulips disasters, I'm not feeling particularly happy about things, but there you are. These things happen, disasters happen, and I'm sure when something good happens, I will tell you. But at the moment, it's just back-to-back disasters. The Scabious, here's another one for you. The Scabious that I transplanted last weekend and painstakingly staked, which totally ruined the cost of production figures for those plants because I probably should have scrapped them. They've had a complete crisis all week. So they pretty much collapsed. They wilted. They look absolutely awful. They just haven't forgiven me for moving them. And they were the most beautiful looking plants before I moved them. So bit of a disaster, but hopefully they will recover. Or that was just an even bigger cost of production loss for absolutely no return, because I'll then have to go and take the time to remove them and remove the staking and take the string off the bamboo canes. So I will let you know how I get on with that one. Now, news from the greenhouse. I've had to throw away my first batch of Nigella, which I did in the soil blocking. It didn't germinate at all. I got some very random seed that came up, just one right in the center, which was very tall and spiky, and I have no idea actually what it is at all. This is one of the downsides to using old compost up, because sometimes you get rogue seeds in there. So I've just cut my losses with those, thrown them away, and the later batches have germinated absolutely fine. So I don't quite know what happened with the first batch. Now, the temperatures have been very variable in the greenhouse. It was actually 30 degrees in there at lunchtime today, and that is still with a missing pane of glass. So if I am around during the day, obviously I can open the door and get some air flowing through to drop the temperatures. It's a bit weird having, the hardy annuals and the half hardies. I haven't done any tenders yet, so I can't comment about that, but having all of the seeds like in one place and trying to keep them all happy. Some of the seeds like a warmer temperature, and I'm resisting the temptation to bring anything inside because I just have done this in the past. I've had seed trays on all the windowsills, on the kitchen table, on the work surfaces, and it is a nightmare, and I don't think it's healthy for me or for them. So everybody has to stay in the greenhouse and they would just have to muddle along. So the germination seems to be absolutely fine. It's just they're just going to be very adaptable plants. I think if they can get through these first few weeks of their lives when the temperature is up and then it's down, they will do absolutely fine when they get out onto the field. Now, the watering is now super easy because you remember last time I told you I was given these baking trays by my neighbor. So all of my chicken thigh trays are sitting on baking trays, which means that I can water the trays, the chicken thigh trays with the seeds in from the bottom because I've punctured holes in all of the trays. So that means that I'm keeping water off the top of the seeds. There's no splashing, there's no mess, there's no washing seeds away. It's all done really nicely from the bottom, and that is a real time saver. Definitely, because saves moving their trays from the shelving onto the table, where they then had to be watered in this huge black sort of like not a trough, but like a black tray. And then when they were done, they had to go back on the shelves. So now everybody gets watered on the shelves. So that is perfect. And the sweet peas have been outside of the greenhouse all week, hardening off together with the broad beans and normal peas. And they are doing absolutely fine. So they can go in the ground now. They are hardened off now. I think if we have any super low temperatures again, obviously I will panic and run up and throw a tarp over them or something, but they're definitely ready to go. Now, in other news, I had another growers meeting, or like a site visit to one of the growers on my local WhatsApp group. So this is a group that I was asked to join last year, and we are all cut flower growers within about 30-minute radius of each other in this area. And I'm not sure how many of us are in the group actually, but there were 9 of us at this meetup on Thursday. And we met at one of the growers' plots that she has. She's about half an hour away from me, and it was absolutely brilliant. So we spent the first hour and a bit walking all of the beds, painstakingly slowly, admiring absolutely everything, especially the peonies and the roses, which were absolutely enormous, like the biggest peonies I've ever seen in my life. The stem length was about a meter, which is just incredible. And also admiring all the new seedlings that have been growing and everything that's overwintered outside, and just admiring everything that Yana had done because she's such a clever lady. She'd just done a beautiful arrangement, and it was just incredible. It's always incredible to see how other growers do it. You learn so much. And then after that, we all piled inside, had hot drinks, cake. Basically, it looked like a huge lunch. And to my shame, I didn't take anything because we were meeting at 11 a.m. and I didn't think it would be a lunch. So I completely misjudged it. And I knew Yana was bringing quiches, and I thought, well, we'll just have a bit of quiche and a cup of tea and then we'll be off. But no, everybody bought something. So I feel really bad about that. And there was the most incredible spread. So we had, these gorgeous quiches. Somebody bought a homemade sourdough loaf of bread, which was just absolutely incredible. And cheeses, also amazing. Salad, we had grapes, there were strawberries, there were meringues. Rachel actually bought a profiterole stack, which was just like another level. And I'm really gutted I didn't have one of those. And Victoria bought cannoli with just those little Italian, like a rolled up kind of a biscuit thing with like this one had like a Nutella chocolate filling inside, and they're covered in chopped hazelnuts. I could have eaten the entire plate. They were so good. So we sat down and we shared all our stories with all the things that are not going as they are supposed to, all the things that have damped off, died off, been eaten, dug up, just vanished, basically. The usual stuff. We shared all sorts of information. We answered each other's questions. We shared supplier information, hints and tips about where we get things from, how people are dealing with drainage, irrigation, watering, suppliers, where we're going to get this from, where we're going to get that from. It was really, really amazing. And I'm also sorry that I had to leave early. I had to go on a job, which was about 45 minutes away. So I had to leave earlier than I would have liked. And I didn't get a chance, as I say, to have one of those profiteroles. So when it comes to me hosting my event, I feel like the bar is being raised after every meeting. I didn't think it could get better than Fenella's biscuits and petals in ice cubes, but it turns out that if someone takes a profiterole stack to a growers meeting, then the bar is seriously raised. And I'm just thinking already when I'm going to do mine, because I'm off grid, so I've got no water, no electricity, no facilities. I do have a porta potty, but in terms of catering, I'm going to have to put my thinking cap on for how I do that, because I really want to impress these ladies now and hopefully distract them from all the weeds and the trimmed remnants of crops, and distract them with quiche and cake. Now, let me share with you my enormous pricing stuff up that I have managed to do this week as well. I was asked by the lady who runs our local flower hub if any of the growers had lily of the valley. She had a florist that was interested in some, and I said, yes, I've got some. And I counted how many stems I thought I'd have for next week, and I measured them. And then I put on the most ludicrous, laughable price you could possibly ever imagine, which I'm kicking myself for now. I had no idea about the pricing, so I hopped online, benchmarked myself against a couple of different places that I found, one of which was a wholesale import, which I keep telling you that you're not allowed to do that, but it does form part of the strategy. Only this time it completely backfired. And then I found a UK supplier, but I couldn't work out how many stems you got in a bunch. So I made an educated guess and got it wildly, wildly wrong, like so expensive that the florist must have burst out laughing when she heard the price, because now when I think about it now, I think, oh my goodness, Lydia, that is so embarrassing. So naturally, the florist said no, she's going to get them from somewhere else. So I only have myself to blame for that one. I have said that if she needs any extra stems next week, I will happily offer them for a more sensible price. So these things happen, and yes, I've lost the sale, but on the other hand, I will still enjoy them, and maybe I can sell them to somebody else for a sensible price, who knows. But I'm sorry to that florist, because this is the hard part of selling through a third party, and this is not a criticism of the hub in any way, shape or form. It is literally a fact that when there is another layer between you and the buyer, it can be sometimes hard to get that negotiation right. Because if I had said the price to the florist and she'd burst out laughing, I would have said, oh, well, what sort of pricing were you thinking of? And then we could have a negotiation. But it doesn't really work when there's this kind of not a mediator, but like a somebody in between, because obviously the organizer of the hub, she's not there to go back and forward like 50 times to have a conversation, which is quite right. That's not what she's there to do. I made the mistake and the price was rejected, quite rightly. And then that is unfortunately the end of the conversation. So that's just something that I will have to deal with. But if I'd put the wrong price in and I'd underpriced dramatically as well, if I'd gone wrong the other way, I'd be kicking myself if I'd cut a premium flower, because it is a premium flower and it's hyper seasonal and it's highly desirable for wedding bouquets. I'd have been kicking myself if I'd cut the crop and sold it for what it wasn't worth. So, live and learn. It was a lesson there. I will have to sort that out for next time. And of course, the magic of Lily of the Valley is that it's so fleeting that next time is not going to come around until next April. So I have a whole year to work out what my pricing needs to be next year. Now, having said to you that I have worked out how to check Spotify and comments and everything, I then completely forgot to do it. So I'm very sorry about that. If you've left a comment on Spotify, I have just gone through and read all of them. 2 of them were really fantastic, so I want to mention them here. The first one is, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of this person, it's Joe Troke. Anyway, it was about larkspur. And they left this comment a couple of weeks ago. I'd been talking about how I was getting on with my larkspur. And I'm sort of pleased and also sorry to hear that they've had a disaster with it as well. It's not just me, because mine are really not doing anything. They said they are third time lucky with their sowing at the moment. The first sowing got powdery mildew in the autumn. The slugs got the second lot, and now the third lot is under super tight supervision and doing very well. So I would say good luck with the crop, and I hope that you have a fantastic crop. It sounds like third time lucky, I think. Now, the second question I had is from Iowa Farmer. Now, this is a comment about my seed sowing and the reference I made to growing black cornflowers and Clarkia this year. Now, Iowa Farmer asked a really brilliant question about vermiculite and perlite, i.e., will perlite work as well as vermiculite? Do I put vermiculite on top of the seeds that still need light, and where am I located? So, let me answer these quickly. The short answer to this, I'll give you the long answer in a second. The short answer is perlite is not as good as vermiculite, and I'll explain why in a second. In answer to the question, do I put vermiculite on top of seeds that need light? Yes, I do, but I just put a thinner layer. So with the ones that need covering, don't need light to germinate, I wouldn't say a thick layer of vermiculite, because you really don't want to put any more on than you absolutely need. It is surprisingly expensive, or I think it is anyway. But for the seeds the seeds that do need light to germinate, I will put an even lighter covering on, almost just like a dusting of sugar or something, just literally like a dusting. And in answer to the question, where am I located? I'm in the UK. I'm in the south of the UK, west of London. So it's about USDA Hardy rating 8/9. Kind of depends. The weather's changing so much over the years, but that's pretty much where we are, where I am. So let's talk about the difference between vermiculite and perlite, because they are sitting next to each other on the shelves in the garden centres, and you might think, well, what's the difference and which one should I buy? Now, perlite is the very, very white one. They're like little tiny balls. They're almost like miniature balls of those white plastic balls that you often get if you buy a delicate product and it comes in a box, like maybe a TV or something, and those little tiny balls of plastic just fly everywhere. So perlite is very much like that. They're little tiny round balls, and it's actually expanded volcanic glass that's been heated up until it kind of explodes like popcorn. Perlite is lovely. It's very free draining. It doesn't hold very much water at all. It's very, very light and airy. When you pick the bag up off the shelf, it's like picking up a feather. You can't even tell that you're carrying anything. It's extraordinary. You'll have a huge bag and it literally weighs nothing. It doesn't hold any nutrients whatsoever. It doesn't really do anything. It's totally inert. It's just these little tiny balls, and it's super, super light. Now, vermiculite is an expanded mica mineral, and it holds water a little bit like a sponge. And the pieces aren't round like perlite. They are sort of flat. They're just like, well, they're just completely flat. They're like little tiny flat pieces, and they're all slightly different colors as well. They're sort of beigey, goldeny color, and they're a little bit, I wouldn't say light reflective, but maybe that's just when you look inside the bag, they sort of bounce the light back at you. Much like perlite, they are light, so the bags don't weigh very much, but they have got a little bit more weight to them, and they form a really nice, even, smooth layer. So the perlite, these little white balls, they just sort of land on the compost, whereas the vermiculite just seems to make this kind of lovely, smooth layer over the top. And so the reason that you'd put something like vermiculite on top of your seeds, and you don't have to, you can just put a fine layer of compost, but the reason I like to do it is because my compost is reusable stuff that's in this huge tub in my garden, and it's a very mixed bag of, it's not a bag, it's a mixed bag is the expression. It's a mixture of all sorts of different types of stuff that I have chucked out of pots in my garden and dumped it into this big tub, and I mix it all around. So sometimes you get like a layer of really heavy, thick soil that's come from somewhere. It might have some stones in it, it might have some bits of bark, might have a worm or two. They're constantly fishing worms out of this tub. Then I might have a layer that is some compost that's come out of a bag that I've bought from a shop that I've just thrown in the remains of the bag. And that's obviously very light, very airy, quite dry. Then there'll be just sort of normal soil that's come out of the ground or that's fallen off the roots of something that I've thrown away. So it's basically a really mixed bag. Could also be the remnants of something that I've bought from a wholesaler or from the shop and just knocked a bit of the soil off, and that all goes in the pot. So you get the drift. It's basically a real mixed bag. But what that means is that when I'm seed sowing, it doesn't matter so much for when I'm just filling these chicken thigh trays, because I just need a layer that's, a couple of inches deep. But when it comes to sprinkling a fine layer of compost over the top, in order to do that with my setup, I would have to go and buy a bag of compost and use it just exclusively for topping my seeds. And I found over the years that the seeds are just very, very small. A lot of the ones I seem to have are really small, apart from things like, broad beans or sunflowers, which are decent sized. Could be that it's just because my eyesight's going as I'm getting old. I just find everything really, really small these days. And so the thought of covering these tiny little things in a layer of very fine compost is just a bit fiddly and a bit of a faff, and I'd have to go and buy the stuff. So I have enjoyed using vermiculite, and it does a very good job. So it keeps the seeds evenly moist as well, because it's got this little bit of moisture retention, which could be why a couple of the seeds damp off, because there is just too much moisture around the stem. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I water this is another reason why I water from the bottom, to try and keep the tops dry, because you don't want the seedlings you don't want their stems sitting in moisture. It stops everything drying out on the surface, because if you do a top layer with compost, that layer will dry out, whereas vermiculite just does not dry out in the way that compost does. It settles really nicely around the seed because it's so small. Vermiculite, it's not the same as even the finest compost. You can have long strands, you can have little pieces that are quite long, especially if they've mixed any coir in with it, and you can find that sometimes it just doesn't settle very nicely, whereas vermiculite really, really does. The other thing it's great for is that it does allow light through, and this is important because especially with the very, very tiny seeds, you really don't want them to be just dunked under a layer of dark brown material. That means they're not going to get any light. And so the reasons why perlite is not quite so good for this is that because it doesn't hold any moisture whatsoever, you can find that it dries out and very quickly, and then it just stays dry. So you can have some problems with germination if the seeds are not in contact with the compost enough. Now, I try not to touch my seeds after I've sown them. Obviously, I pick them out with my nails. I've got very short nails. I pick them out and I put them on the surface, and then I try not to touch them again, because I've had in the past, sometimes if my hands aren't spotlessly clean, and they're often not, you can find that you put bacteria onto the seeds. So I don't want to be doing that. So I don't press the seeds into the compost, so they really are just sitting on the top, and it's important that they have good contact with the soil. And I find that vermiculite just creates enough of a very light, very delicate layer, but the perlite is just super light, so it kind of just doesn't float on the top because it's obviously in contact, but it doesn't have any weight to it whatsoever. And it is larger. The perlite has larger little balls than the flat vermiculite, so you can find that there are air gaps around, which is also something that I don't want. Also, because it's so light, it can float away if you water overzealously. If you're watering from the top, you can find that it just literally lifts up with the water molecules and tootles off somewhere else. It's really much better to mix perlite in with your soil if you want to loosen it up. But I don't recommend that you do this if you are growing very, very small seeds, because you don't want the seeds to not be in contact with the compost. So I have used perlite in the past. I often use it with things like lavenders or plants that want a gritty a gritty soil mix. Now, in the olden days, we had bags of like pea gravel and stuff, and you just throw in handfuls of pea gravel. And still, sometimes when I tip out pots, I find gravel lurking in there, which I really don't like, because it makes the pots incredibly heavy as well. And it also means that you have to sift the compost or the soil if you want to use it for something else. So it's an absolute pain to do it. Whereas perlite is so incredibly light, you find that you don't have the weight of like stones or gravel in your soil. So I hope that has answered the question. So yes, I do use perlite, but as I say, for lightening up a soil mix, if I was going to put a plant in that liked a really gritty, light soil, like lavenders that don't like having their feet wet. But for seed sowing, I would not use perlite in the mix because it just makes spaces that are too big, and you don't want that with your seedlings. And I don't use it on the top of the seeds because it is, for me, it is just not the right thing. Definitely get vermiculite if you can. It does make things so nice, and also it looks pretty. Not to say that perlite doesn't look pretty, but when all of my trays are covered in a nice layer of vermiculite, again, not too thick because you don't want to waste it, it's expensive, but they just look so pretty. Okay, so I hope that answers the questions. Thank you for leaving your comments on Spotify. I do eventually get round to looking at them, and I very much like hearing from you and appreciating that you take the time to do that. So there we go. Now, final thing for today is the plant profile of the week. And tonight I'm talking about echinops. I love echinops. Do you grow this? It's gorgeous. Came in at number 23 on my plant profitability scale last year, also known as the globe thistle. So you've got long stems with this beautiful blue spiky ball on the top. Absolutely fabulous. I have Echinops retro. Now, the plant itself is very tough. As I say, nice big thick stems, pretty ugly foliage. I actually cut mine from my garden to sell last year because I never got round to putting them on the plot. They were in my garden and I just cut them and sold them from here. In fact, I still don't have any on the plot actually, which is a bit of a mistake. I need to sort that out. Now, this plant originates from this sort of swathe of the world from Southern Europe down to Central Asia, in rocky areas and grasslandy areas. So that tells you what it likes. It likes a lot of sun, nice good drainage, and tough conditions. This is a plant that does not require any kind of pampering. I mean, one look at the stems will probably tell you that. There's lots of different ways of growing it. You can grow it from seed, and I actually harvested quite a lot of seed last year, and oh god, to my shame, I haven't sown it yet, but I did plan on sowing it this year. But you can also just buy the plants as well. It's a perennial, so they will live for a good few years, and they can be divided to increase the numbers. They bulk up really nicely. In fact, they end up pretty chunky after a few years, and dividing them is always a good idea. In terms of caring for mine, well, mine are in my kind of wildlife garden area, which if you're a regular listener, you'll know I've got this area at the front of my place, which I just leave for the wildlife. So it's got some random stuff in there, and that's where my echinops are. I don't go around there very often apart from to fill up the bird baths. So it is left to its own devices. It is not staked. It is not fed or watered or pampered in any way whatsoever. And the plants just come back year after year. They're very tall. They're well over a metre. Yes, hang on, they're probably near 1.5 meters at least. And I don't stake them either. They just do their own thing because the stems are so thick and robust. And they're not exactly like a cut and come again in a traditional sense, but mine will have a second flush later on in the year. Now, they're good for growers like us because they are perennial, so you're going to get a harvest for many years out of them. Super low impact and not low impact, they're high impact actually. They're low input and low maintenance, which means lower cost of production, which is important. They are drought tolerant, they are pest and disease resistant, and they also dry well, so you can sell the dried stems as well. I have to say I didn't have any luck with that, but you know, you just never know. Now, I know that florists like it because it's got this lovely touch of blue that they often have in their weddings, and it's a proper metallic, almost steel-like blue. It's a really, really fantastic colour. It's quite unusual looking. And of course, you've got these perfect spherical heads, which are very pretty, and it lasts a long time in the vase. But things to tell you about: the foliage is downright ugly. The stems are a bit rough and a bit not spiny exactly, but they're not smooth stems. It's not an elegant looking plant. It's not a premium flower like a rose or a hydrangea, so it's not going to get those top prices, and it will take a season to bulk up and get going, especially if you grow it from seed. And I would also say there, wherever you plant it, it's one of those that kind of vanishes in the winter as well. But because it looks a bit mucky when it comes through in the spring, make sure that you mark out where you've planted it so that somebody doesn't strim over it. That's my tip of the day. Now, it is Friday, so I'm going to wish you a wonderful weekend. I hope you have an amazing time wherever you are and whatever you're doing, especially if you're doing any growing or anything exciting like that. And I hope that you will come back and join me for the next episode on Tuesday, when I look forward to sharing. Hopefully something good will happen. I mean, it has to, right? You know, after the tulip disasters and the strimming disaster, third time lucky, right? So have a super weekend. Take care, and I'll catch you next week.